You know, we walk around every single day with this deeply ingrained assumption about the world. Like, we just assume the ground beneath our feet is solid.
Right. It's the literal foundation of our reality.
Exactly. We build our homes on it, we pave roads over it, and we just, trust implicitly that it's going to stay exactly where it is.
It's a profound psychological anchor. I mean, almost everything we do relies on that baseline stability.
But then, in just a fraction of a second, that assumption is violently shattered. The solid rock beneath you starts behaving like a liquid.
The horizon tilts.
Yeah, and the very foundation of your reality suddenly becomes a weapon. Today is June 8, 2026, and we are coming to you with breaking news. A massive earthquake has just struck off the coast of Sarangani in the southern Philippines.
It's an incredibly tragic and rapidly developing situation. The sheer tectonic forces at play here are almost incomprehensible to the human mind.
And that is exactly why we're dedicating this deep dive to understanding it. Because when a disaster of this scale happens, the headlines usually just throw numbers and panic at you.
Yeah, they rarely explain the actual mechanics.
Right, so to help you actually grasp the magnitude of what is unfolding right now, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources. We're looking at real-time telemetry from the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology.
Known as FIESHIVEL-LCS.
Right, FIESHIVEL-LCS. And we also have deep data from the U.S. Geological Survey, breaking news from Al Jazeera, structural engineering journals, emergency prep guides from the Red Cross and Shakeout, and even trauma psychiatry models.
Because the goal here isn't just to report the news, it's to really deconstruct it.
Exactly. We are going to unpack the complete anatomy of an earthquake. We'll trace it from the moment the rock tears miles underground to the physics of how to survive the violent shaking on the surface.
And why the buildings around us either stand strong or completely collapse.
And finally, we'll look at how the human mind recovers from the invisible, lingering trauma left in the rubble. Okay, let's unpack this.
To truly comprehend what the people in the Philippines are enduring right now, we really have to start by looking at the geometry of the rupture itself.
Right, so let's lay out the raw facts of today's event first. At 7:37 a.m. local time, this quake hit 32 kilometers west of Masim, Sarangani, and it was at a depth of 33 kilometers underground.
Triggered by subduction along the Cotabato Trench.
Yeah, and the shaking was so intensely violent that tremors were felt 420 kilometers away across the ocean in Manado, Indonesia.
Which is staggering.
It really is. And the human cost is already mounting. Initial reports show 15 people feared dead, 129 injured, and there was a massive structural failure where a Jollibee fast food restaurant completely collapsed in General Santos City.
What's fascinating here is the three-dimensional nature of that threat. I mean, the media invariably points to a spot on the map and calls it the epicenter.
Right, you always hear epicenter.
But the epicenter is merely the geographic coordinates on the Earth's surface. The real story is happening at the hypocenter.
A hypocenter.
Yeah, that's the exact physical location, which in this case is 33 kilometers straight down in the dark, where the fault plane suddenly slips and grinds past itself.
So if I'm picturing this, the hypocenter is the actual subterranean bomb going off, and the epicenter is just the X painted on the ground directly above it.
That is a perfect way to picture it, actually.
Okay, now the number dominating the news cycle is 7.8. They're calling it a magnitude 7.8 quake.
Yeah.
And almost without fail, the anchors are calling it a 7.8 on the Richter scale.
Oh, yeah.
But diving into the USGS data, it seems like the media is clinging to an outdated term here. Like, how does this scale actually work? Is the Richter scale just like a volume knob on a stereo, where an 8 is simply one notch louder than a 7?
Well, no, that is a very common misconception. Charles Richter and Benno Gutenberg developed that original scale, which was officially called the local magnitude scale back in 1935.
Right.
And it was a logarithmic scale, meaning it doesn't graph as a straight line. So a whole number increase, say from a 6 to a 7, represents a tenfold increase in the measured amplitude of the physical waves.
Tenfold.
Right. But the far more terrifying metric is the energy release. Every whole number increase corresponds to an energy release roughly 31.6 times greater.
Wait, 31.6 times. So a magnitude 7 isn't just a slightly worse version of a 6. It's unleashing nearly 32 times more destructive kinetic energy.
Exactly. It's an exponential leap in destruction. A magnitude 8 releases 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 6.
Wow.
But the original Richter scale has a fatal flaw. It physically maxes out or saturates.
Satures. How does a mathematical scale just max out?
Well, it wasn't just math. It was limited by the hardware of the era. Richter used a specific instrument called a Wood-Anderson torsion seismograph.
Which is what exactly?
Think of it as a delicate needle suspended by a wire, tracing a line on a rotating drum of paper. When a massive quake hit, the ground shook so violently that the physical needle would hit the absolute limits of the machine.
Oh, it just couldn't swing any wider.
Right. So the original Richter scale simply cannot accurately measure anything much larger than a 7.0. It basically goes blind to the extra energy.
That makes total sense. The machine physically can't capture the data. So what are seismologists actually calculating today to get that 7.8 number for Sarangani?
Today, they use the moment magnitude scale, or METAView. Instead of just relying on a needle-scratching paper, moment magnitude calculates the actual physical size of the geological tear.
Okay.
It multiplies the total area of the fault that ruptured by the distance the rocks slipped past each other. It calculates the true energy released.
So the math is totally different.
Completely. The math was reverse engineered, so the final numbers generally align with the old Richter scale, which is why the press lazily keeps using the old name, but the underlying physics are entirely different.
And to put today's 7.8 into historical perspective, I mean, while it is causing massive devastation right now in the Philippines, a 7.8 doesn't even make it onto the USGS top 10 largest earthquakes list.
No, it doesn't. The ceiling for tectonic power is just staggering. The largest earthquake ever recorded by human instruments was the 1960 Great Chilean Earthquake.
What was the magnitude on that one?
It was a colossal moment, magnitude 9.5.
9.5, wow. With those 31.6 times energy multipliers we just talked about, the amount of energy released there is almost beyond human comprehension.
It literally altered the global rotation of the Earth and caused permanent shifts in the topography.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was followed by the 1964 Alaska quake at 9.2, the 2004 Sumatra quake at 9.1, which triggered that horrific tsunami killing over 280,000 people.
Right.
And even just recently, last year in 2025, an M8.8 off Kamchatka, Russia.
So that exponential kinetic energy doesn't just stay in the ground. It translates directly into violent horizontal ground acceleration on the surface.
Yes, it does.
And that brings us to the physical reality of survival. Because when the floor beneath you suddenly accelerates sideways at several feet per second, your past instincts are actually going to get you killed.
They absolutely will. The moment that lateral acceleration hits, human beings tend to panic and fall back on outdated myths.
Yeah, for example, as a kid, I was universally taught that if the ground starts shaking, I should sprint outside immediately. Or, if I can't reach the door, I should stand under a doorway because the frame will protect me from the roof caving in.
And emergency management data from both the Red Cross and the Global Shakeout Initiative explicitly warn against both of those actions.
Really? Why the doorway?
Well, doorways in modern homes are no structurally stronger than any other part of the wall. More importantly, standing in a doorway leaves you completely exposed to the actual leading cause of earthquake injuries, which is flying objects.
So it's not the ceiling coming down that's the primary threat.
Not at all. Decades of hospital data show that you are far more likely to be hospitalized by a television launching across the room, or shattered window glass, or falling bookcases than you are by a catastrophic building collapse.
Okay, what about running outside?
Running outside is even worse.
It seems logical, though, getting out of a shaking building.
It seems logical until you look at the mechanics of how buildings shed debris. The exterior of a building is the absolute most hazardous zone.
Because stuff falls off.
Exactly. As a structure violently flexes, the non-structural elements like brick facades, heavy glass panes, ornamental masonry, and air conditioning units, they shear off and rain down directly over the exits and sidewalks.
Oh, well, yeah.
Plus, the violent jucking of the ground makes it incredibly difficult to walk, meaning most people trip, fall, and sustain severe injuries just trying to reach the door.
Got it. And the triangle of life thing.
Oh, please completely ignore the viral internet myth known as the triangle of life. Rescue experts have thoroughly debunked it.
Okay, so if doorways and running outside are death traps, what is the actual scientifically backed protocol for you to follow, especially for the people experiencing these severe aftershocks right now?
The global standard is drop, cover, and trigrak. Hold on. The split second you feel the primary wave, drop to your hands and knees.
Keep her being thrown down.
Right. This instantly lowers your center of gravity so the subsequent waves don't violently throw you to the floor. Next, cover your head and neck with one arm. If there is a sturdy desk or table nearby, crawl completely underneath it.
And if there isn't?
If there isn't, crawl next to an interior wall, away from windows. Finally, hold on to your shelter.
Hold on, because the desk is going to be sliding across the floor with the acceleration.
Yes, you have to anchor yourself to the shelter and move with it. If you have no desk, clasp both hands tightly behind your neck.
But, those guidelines assume full mobility. What if you physically cannot drop to the floor and get back up?
Accessibility is deeply integrated into the modern protocols. If you use a cane, the guidance is to sit down on a chair or bed and protect your head, but keep your cane secured between your legs so you aren't stranded when the shaking stops.
That makes sense.
If you use a wheelchair or a walker, lock the wheels immediately. Bend forward as much as your mobility allows and cover the back of your neck with a book, a pillow, or your arms.
What if you're in a car?
If you are driving, carefully pull over to a shoulder, well away from overpasses or power lines, set the parking brake, and stay buckled in.
Survival during the shaking is step one. But the emergency management data universally points out a terrifying gap between the quake ending and state relief arriving.
There's always a gap.
Yeah, we know Philippine President Marcos Jr. is mobilizing national relief for Mindanao right now, but infrastructure is shattered, which means on a micro level, your survival kit is your only lifeline.
Because when a 7.8 hits, underground water mains snap like dry spaghetti. The power grid goes dark. You have to be self-reliant.
And the specific logistics of that kit, according to the Oregon government guidelines we pulled, are fascinating. The guidelines mandate 1 gallon of water per person per day.
Which is a lot of water.
It is. You need 3 days of food for an evacuation or a 2-week supply if you're trapped at home. You need a 7-day stockpile of essential medications.
Right.
But the items that really highlight the cascading failures of infrastructure are the ones people always forget. Like, you need a manual can opener because your electric one is just a paperweight without the grid. You need extra physical cash because without power and internet, credit card terminals and ATMs are dead metal. And you need physical copies of your deeds and passports because your digital records might be inaccessible or your home might simply be gone.
All of that preparation, however, really hinges on one monumental variable, which is the structural integrity of the walls around you.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of the built environment. Because dropping under a desk only saved you if the concrete doesn't pancake.
Precisely.
We saw this with the collapse of the Jollibee restaurant and the structural failures at Notre Dame of Daddy Angus University in Serengeti today. Why does one building turn into dust while a seemingly identical building right next door sways and survives?
Well, the answer lies in how a structure manages lateral shear forces. Every building is naturally designed to fight gravity, the downward vertical force of its own weight.
Sure.
But an earthquake introduces massive horizontal side-to-side forces. The structural engineering journals highlight that the absolute deadliest structures in the world are unreinforced masonry buildings, or URMs.
URMs. These are your classic, beautiful old brick or stone buildings, right?
Yeah, they are aesthetically pleasing, but structurally brittle. Bricks are incredibly strong when you stack weight on top of them, but they have virtually zero tensile strength.
Meaning they don't stretch or bend.
Right. When the ground violently jerks horizontally, the heavy brick walls want to stay completely stationary due to inertia, but the foundation is moving.
Which causes them to snap.
It creates massive shear stress. Without internal steel rebar to flex and absorb that energy, the brittle mortar simply cracks, the load-bearing walls blow outward, and the heavy roof drops straight down.
So how do we fix them? I mean, looking at the engineering text, they discuss retrofitting these old buildings. And at a basic level, I'm picturing like a dentist filling a cavity. Are engineers just injecting a really strong epoxy into the cracks to stop the bricks from crumbling?
That is the first phase, actually, known as repointing and epoxy injection. Engineers remove the decaying mortar and inject a specialized low-viscosity epoxy.
Low viscosity meaning it's really thin.
Very thin. This liquid is so fine it can penetrate and seal microcracks down to 0.13 millimeters, essentially gluing the loose masonry back together.
Wow.
But to push back on your analogy a bit, fixing a cavity just repairs past damage. It doesn't prevent the tooth from breaking again.
Fair point.
To survive the next quake, you need something more like a structural corset.
A corset. You mean tying the building together?
Exactly. The most critical intervention is anchoring and tying. In an unreinforced building, the four walls, the floor, and the roof act independently. When the shaking starts, they literally pull apart from each other.
That sounds like a disaster.
It is. So engineers install steel angles, massive anchor bolts, and plates to securely stitch the walls directly into the floor joists and the roof diaphragm.
Okay, forcing the entire structure to move together as one single composite box.
Yes.
The engineering journals also dedicate a lot of space to CFRP overlays. From what I understand, this is essentially wrapping these heavy, brittle brick buildings in high-tech carbon fiber tape, which sounds absurdly simple for stopping a building collapse.
It sounds simple, but the material science is extraordinary. Carbon fiber reinforced polymer fabrics are rolled out and epoxied directly onto the masonry walls.
Like wallpaper.
Sort of, yeah. They are incredibly lightweight but possess massive tensile strength. After the 1994 Northridge earthquake in California, engineers actually utilized these carbon fiber wraps to literally double the flexural strength of older walls.
But if we look at the absolute cutting edge of seismic engineering, there is a much more extreme option out there.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate intervention is base isolation.
Base isolation. Are they literally disconnecting the foundation of the building from the earth itself?
In a mechanical sense, yes. Base isolation involves severing the building from its foundation and installing flexible bearings, usually alternating layers of heavy rubber and steel between the ground and the structure.
Okay.
These bearings are incredibly stiff vertically, so they can hold the millions of pounds of building weight, but they are highly flexible horizontally.
So when that lateral acceleration hits and the ground violently jerks sideways, the rubber bearings flex and absorb that kinetic energy, and the building itself essentially glides or floats above the chaos.
It beautifully decouples the structure from the ground movement. The forces transmitted into the superstructure are drastically reduced.
But I'm guessing that's not cheap.
Oh, not at all. Installing base isolators under an existing building is wildly expensive and highly complex. It is generally reserved for squat, bulky buildings with massive cultural or emergency value. Think historic city halls, data centers, or major trauma hospitals.
Okay, let's say everything goes perfectly. You had your emergency kit packed, you dropped, covered, and held on, and you were lucky enough to be inside a hospital perfectly retrofitted with base isolators.
You step outside physically unscathed.
Right. But diving into the medical and psychiatric research, it becomes glaringly obvious that surviving the shaking is really just the prologue. The physical rubble might be cleared away by heavy machinery, but the mental rubble remains.
The psychological shockwave of a disaster this vast is profound. The sudden, violent destruction of a community creates what sociologist Kai Erikson termed collective trauma.
Collective trauma.
Yeah, it is a simultaneous rupture of the entire social fabric.
We usually use the word stress so casually, like an emotion, like, oh, I am stressed about a deadline at work. But according to the medical journals we have here, this level of disaster-induced stress actually stops being an emotion and acts as a physical poison in the body.
It acts as a literal neurotoxin. When you are thrust into a sustained state of terror, grief, and hypervigilance, which is exactly what the survivors in Sarangani are enduring right now as aftershocks continue to hit.
Their systems are just overwhelmed.
Right. The brain's alarm system, the amygdala, gets stuck in the on position. Your brain continuously floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline.
Fight or flight hormones.
Yeah.
But they're meant to help you sprint away from a predator, not sit in your system for 3 weeks.
Precisely. In the short term, they keep you alert and alive. But prolonged cortisol exposure causes severe systemic inflammation.
Which does what to the body?
It exhausts the adrenal glands. It actually impairs the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logical decision-making and emotional regulation.
So you literally can't think straight.
No. Survivors suffer from chronic fatigue, severe insomnia, and an inability to process basic information.
And compounding that cognitive impairment is the heavy burden of guilt. The medical texts highlight a phenomenon called survivor syndrome. It seems incredibly counterintuitive, you know. Why would someone feel intense guilt simply because they lived?
It is a really dark paradox of human empathy. Survivors often experience an intense, completely irrational shame for being alive while their loved ones, or even strangers, perished.
Wow.
We saw this documented extensively following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the 2010 Haiti earthquake.
Oh, I'm sure.
People felt profound guilt that their home withstood the shaking while their neighbors collapsed. They felt shame while fighting for severely rationed water. It manifests as self-blame, and if left untreated, it rapidly solidifies into severe PTSD.
And it is crucial to acknowledge that disasters are not equal opportunity events. The tectonic plates don't care who you are, but the aftermath absolutely discriminates.
Disasters act as a brutal magnifying glass on existing social inequalities. They disproportionately target the vulnerable.
Like the elderly.
Exactly. Think about the elderly who lack the mobility to evacuate quickly, Or children whose developing brains are uniquely susceptible to structural trauma.
And low-income areas, too.
It severely impacts low-income families living in marginalized areas with unreinforced housing, and people with disabilities who suddenly lose access to critical medical support networks and assistive technology.
So how do you treat a trauma that massive? I mean, you can't just hand a displaced family sleeping in a tent a pamphlet for cognitive behavioral therapy.
No, standard clinical therapy is entirely the wrong tool for the immediate aftermath. The globally recognized protocol is psychological first aid, or PFA.
From the literature, PFA seems less about unpacking your childhood and more about stabilizing your present reality.
That is the core of it. TFA is designed to establish immediate physical and emotional safety. It is about calming the nervous system, reuniting fractured families, and providing clear, accurate information so people feel a sense of control.
Right, because you cannot process deep psychological grief when you don't know where your child is or where your next meal is coming from.
Exactly.
One of the sources highlights a specific model developed in India that seems incredibly effective at this. The knee-hands model from the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. What makes it so brilliant is its heavy emphasis on cultural context.
Yeah, it avoids the common mistake of just airdropping foreign psychiatric clinicians into a disaster zone where they don't speak the language or grasp the cultural nuances.
Right.
Instead, the NEAM-HANDS model trains local community workers to deliver psychosocial care.
So it relies on the community to heal the community.
It empowers them. These local workers understand the cultural fabric. They actively encourage traditional mourning rituals, which are essential for communal processing of grief, rather than isolating individuals in sterile one-on-one therapy sessions.
And this is where social workers truly become the unsung architects of disaster recovery.
Yeah.
They act as vital brokers. They aren't just sitting there talking about feelings. They are the connective tissue linking traumatized individuals to housing vouchers, medical care, and food distribution.
They literally help stitch the fractured community back together.
So what does this all mean for you? When you watch the news and see an earthquake ravaging the Philippines, it is so much more than shifting tectonic plates. It's a massive, multifaceted test.
Yeah.
It tests our mathematical models, our structural engineering, our personal emergency preparation, and ultimately our capacity for community empathy.
It stress tests the resilience of every single system we have built, both the physical ones made of concrete and the social ones made of people.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the tectonic and human realities of earthquakes. We hope you walk away from this feeling significantly more informed about the invisible forces shaping our Earth, and a little better prepared for the day the ground stops being solid.
We spent a lot of time today talking about how we physically retrofit brick-and-mortar buildings, injecting epoxy and tying floors to walls to withstand invisible seismic shockwaves. But it raises an important question for you to mull over.
Okay.
How do we proactively retrofit our own minds and local communities? If a massive shockwave, whether it is a literal earthquake, a sudden financial crisis, or a personal tragedy hits your life tomorrow, do you have the psychological anchor bolts and social base isolators already installed to keep your foundation from crumbling?
That is the thought to sit with today. Go check your emergency kits, practice your drop, cover, and hold on, and keep learning. Until next time.